Okay, so now that you have finished your underglaze painting, this is a demo of the Mishima technique, which is a type of inlaying where you can carve lines and put color and wipe away the excess surface color so that it's whatever color you have inlaid is left just in the lines. So you've completed all the painting that needs to be done to the surface. So I have my shell painting and the background is blue. Each of these had 3 coats of underglaze to make sure that the color was very opaque and you can't see any of the color below it. So what you're going to need for this is your underglaze color, which you will be inlaying. I am going to use black. It will just make the lines show up really well. I would suggest using a contrasting color so that the inlaid color isn't very similar. You're also going to need wax to lay over the surface, and I would suggest using a brush for the wax that you don't love because it's hard to get the wax completely out of the brush even though it is water-based. And then you will need another paintbrush to wipe off any of the bits, and you will need your carving tools. It could be a pin tool, it could be, I'm going to use a toothpick if you have one, it could be a paper clip or a needle. Whatever you have available at home that is pointy will do the trick. So first I am going to lay down a layer of wax onto the painted surface. So I'm opening my wax. This is my designated wax paintbrush, and I'm just going to cover the area that I'm going to carve through. And you want to do a couple of coats of wax, so you'll just lay it on in a thin layer, let it dry, and then you can add another layer on top. And it does dry pretty transparent, so you shouldn't have a problem being able to see your image underneath it. So there you go. I'm not going to go too far outside of the shell, so I don't need to paint too much wax on. Now I'll just quickly fan it and let it dry. You can also wet your paintbrush for the wax. That will help the wax wash out of it a bit easier. So you can see the outside is getting pretty dry. And I'll quickly just paint another coat. Try to go a little bit different direction as well to cover the surface. And then you should be good to go and just let it dry. Make sure you rinse your brush, your wax brush immediately when you're done so that the wax doesn't dry in there. So now I'm just letting this dry. Okay, so now I've waited about 5 minutes. My layer of wax is pretty dry. And so I'm just going to use my carving tool and carve in any areas that I want to look darker. So I'm going to outline it and kind of go in between all of the bumps of the shell and in the spot that I want to be darker so that I can inlay that color. So right now I'm just kind of going around the outline. You will have to carve a little bit deeper so that you get through all of the underglaze layers as well as the wax layer on top. So when you see that the clay is showing through underneath, that is a good depth to carve to. You don't need to carve too deep, you just need to make sure that you get through all of those layers so that you can inlay that color. And while you're carving, resist the urge to wipe away those little bits that kind of collect on the surface. You just have to let those dry a little bit, and then you can use your brush to wipe those away. So I'm just going to carve on all of these lines. And it can be a little bit difficult to carve on a curved surface, so you just have to figure out a way to brace your hand so that you can be steady enough to carve on that surface. Okay, so now I've carved all the outlines, and I think what I'm going to do is carve little lines here so that that black will inlay in these lines and make kind of a shadow. Maybe I'll do that along these lines too. Keep in mind that whatever you carve will be filled with that contrasting color. Okay, so now I'm just going to fan these a little bit. While I'm fanning, some of the pieces are drying and falling off. But whatever doesn't fall off, you can then use your brush. If you have a more rough bristled brush, it will probably work better. I don't have one right now, so I'm just going to use a softer bristled brush. But if you just go over it quickly, it should brush away most of the extra bits. then you can see if you need to fix anything. So I see here that I want this to just turn all black. So I'm quickly fixing that. And I would suggest just re-going through all the lines, repeating that step to clean out the lines so you have nice crisp lines when you go to add in the black. Or whatever color that you choose to inlay. Okay, so that looks pretty good. And now what I'm going to do, here's what it looks like. Now what I'm going to do, make sure you sweep away the little bits so they don't stick in the bottom of your mug. And I'm going to take the black with a paintbrush. A softer paintbrush will work well for this because you can gently brush it over the surface. So I'm just going to dip it in the black and cover all of those lines. You'll probably have to paint in different directions so that gets into those lines. And just remember that wherever you don't put wax, this will color the background. So I made the wax a little bit close to the edge, so I'm just making sure that I'm not going over that. But I'm painting in all different directions so that it fills in all of the cracks. So now I'm just going to scrape off my brush and try to sweep off any excess. And then using a damp sponge, I'm just going to sponge the surface, not really spreading anything around, just sponging it. And you can rinse your sponge in water and repeat that step. I wouldn't wipe too much, I would just dab if you can. Towards the end you'll probably have to wipe a little bit, but so you could see that the color is in the lines that I carved. And I'm just doing this very gently because I don't want to rub away any excess wax. Because if I rub away the wax that's covering the rest of the color of the shell, the black will bleed into that part and turn the surface color black. So I'm just taking extra time to kind of do this. And so now you can really see that the black has gone into the cracks and is outlining wherever I've inlaid it. And that is the Mishima technique.